Good morning. I'm Peter Fromm, and I'm the director of the Michael S. Ansari Africa Center here at the Atlantic Council. On behalf of the acting chairman of the Atlantic Council, General Brent Scowcroft, and our president and CEO, Fred Kemp, it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning for this discussion of Somaliland's achievement in a fragile region. Before introducing our guest of honor, permit me to say a word about the Council's Africa Center. The Atlantic Council's Ansari Africa Center was established in September 2009 with the mission to help transform U.S. and European policy approaches to Africa by emphasizing the building of strong geopolitical partnerships with African states and strengthening economic growth and prosperity on the continent. The center seeks to engage and inform both policymakers and the general public of the strategic importance of Africa, both globally and for the American and European interests in particular, through programs and publications, as well as a robust media presence. Within the context of the Atlantic Council's work to promote constructive transatlantic leadership and engagement in international affairs, based on the central role of the Atlantic community in meeting the international challenges of our time, the Center supports and collaborates with the public and private sectors in forging practical solutions to challenges and opportunities in Africa. It's in the spirit of this mandate that I'm delighted to convene this particular discussion and to welcome His Excellency Ahmed Mohamed Siilanyo, President of the Republic of Somaliland, and the members of the delegation which accompanied him to Washington for meetings this week with United States officials and other stakeholders. The delegation includes First Lady Amina Haji Mohammed Jirde, the Minister of Presidential Affairs, Hersi Ali Haji Hassan, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mohammed Abdullahi Omar, Dr. Said Ali Shir, the Minister of Planning, Hussein Abidwale, the Minister of Mining, Energy, and Water Resources, Osman Sardid, the Minister of State for Finance, as well as Kumiya Mohammed, advisor to the President. Before introducing President Siilanyo, let me also acknowledge the presence here of several fellow Somaliland enthusiasts, among them some distinguished veterans of the International Observation Team at the 2010 election, which resulted in President Siilanyo's inauguration. And like His Excellency Don Ramon Gil Casares, the Ambassador of Spain to the United States, Ambassador Lang Shammerhorn, who was also with us on that delegation, as well as great Atlantic Council Board Director, Ambassador Mary Carlin Yates, former Deputy to the Commander for Civil Military Affairs at the U.S. Africa Command, her husband, Ambassador John Yates, former U.S. Special Envoy for Somalia, and Atlantic Council International Advisory Board member, Tewodro Sashanafi. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Also delighted to also welcome Ambassador Martinez Caro, the Director of Spain's Casa Africa, who honors us with his presence. As I look around, I could probably go on singling out other members at length and depth for their engagement in Somaliland. There's something about the country and its people and their remarkable achievement, despite the odds against them, that draws together an equally intrepid group of friends abroad. Many of whom then go on to draw still others into Somaliland's circle. If I can just cite one example from my own case, my enthusiasm, some unkind souls might accuse me of a mania, led me to convince my good friend Greg Mills of the Brenthurst Foundation, South Africa, to fund a study by a group of prominent African specialists, including Professors Christopher Clapham of Cambridge, Holger Hansen of the University of Copenhagen, and Jeffrey Herbst, then of Miami of Ohio, on Somaliland's non-recognition, copies of which are available outside. Greg, in turn, was won over by his own visits to Somaliland. As part of that project, that he brought in counterinsurgency expert David Kilcullen. And as a result, there's a chapter on Somaliland in what lessons it has to give for the rest of that region in a book which Greg, David, and I just co-authored on Somalia, Fixing Africa's Most Fragile State. And that's for the Department of Shameless Self-Promotion. In short, this is an extraordinary story that, if you're new to it, prepare to be engaged. Now, it's my honor to introduce the man whom you came here to hear, the President of the Republic of Somaliland, His Excellency Ahmed Mohamed Siilanyo. A native of the northwestern town of Burao, in what is then the British Protectorate of Somaliland, President Siilanyo earned undergraduate and master's degrees in economics at the University of Manchester. Following Somaliland's independence on June 26, 1960, and the subsequent independence of Somalia Italiana, and the union of the two, he served in government of the resulting Somali Republic as Minister of Planning and Coordination, Minister of Commerce, and Chairman of the National Economic Board. As the former Somali Democratic Republic increasingly turned into a dictatorship, and a genocidal one at that, he served as chairman of the Somali National Movement from 1984 to 1990, the longest tenure of any leader of Somaliland's resistance and what eventually became its national liberation movement. Here I would draw your attention to the fact that of all the successful liberation organizations on the African continent, only the SNM voluntarily disarmed itself after it won its struggle, handed power over to local leaders, and abstained from turning itself into a political party, much less dominating the post-independence political scene. It's a remarkable achievement. President Siilanyo subsequently served as a member of Somaliland's House of Representatives, as the country's finance minister. He ran for president in 2003 and lost to Dahir Rayal Kahin by 80 votes out of 500,000 cast. I mention this because of the extraordinarily exceptional manner in which he contested the results in the courts, lost, yet graciously and peacefully accepted the ruling. It's worth noting on an African continent where electoral and post-electoral violence remains very much a concern, that even a decade ago, Somaliland's leaders and peoples evinced incredible political maturity. Running again in 2010 as the candidate of the Peace, Unity, and Development Party, Kumiye, he beat the incumbent by a convincing 16% margin, and after a smooth transition, for which I think credit is owed to both the victor and the defeated, he was inaugurated as president on July 27th of the same year. Since then, President Siilanyo has presided over multi-party municipal elections, streamlined the country's tax system. And if I may, Mr. President, I would suggest when you meet with U.S. congressional leaders this week, you tell them how you increase revenues by cutting the tax rate by over half. He's also completed the construction of over 150 schools, enhanced the professionalization of the country's military, and maintained peace and stability within Somaliland's borders that make it such an exception in the region. And please welcome me, join me in welcoming His Excellency, President Siilanyo.
Thank you very much. I would like to extend my appreciation to Dr. Peter Pham and the Atlantic Council for inviting me to give this address today. The Atlantic Council, thanks in part to Peter Pham's diligent leadership at the Michael Ansari Africa Center, has stood out among America's leading public policy institutions for promoting a truly interdisciplinary approach to understanding the politics and economics of East Africa. It is therefore a great pleasure and an honor for me to exchange views today on Somaliland and the future of our region with such distinguished participants. Ladies and gentlemen, I have traveled to Washington today from Somaliland, a nation that defends its borders, protects its citizens, and mints its own currency. A nation that your former Secretary of Defense called simply an entity that works. But a nation that has not yet been recognized by the United States or the international community. Somaliland became an independent sovereign state on 26 June 1960. 5 days after independence, Somaliland chose to unite with Somalia with the aim of creating a greater Somalia, comprised of several former European colonies with citizens of ethnic Somali origin. Almost immediately, the people of Somaliland were excluded from decision-making and representative governance in the new Somali Republic. In turn, our people rejected the Somali Republic's constitution by referendum, and their disenchantment continued throughout the early years of the Union as political and economic isolation grew. After assuming power in a military coup in October 1969, Mohammed Siad Barre led a brutal military dictatorship that in the 1980s embarked on a violent campaign against the people of Somaliland, killing more than 50,000 civilians and displacing 10 times as many people. Despite the atrocities committed, Somaliland rose from the ashes to rebuild and emerge stronger than ever before. We were determined not to allow such a massacre of men, women, and children happen again. The people of Somaliland would no longer be victims in our own land. Following the collapse of the Somali state in 1991, the people of Somaliland decided to withdraw from the Union and reassert Somaliland's sovereignty and independence in full compliance with international law. As Somalia's disintegration unfolded, Somaliland built a functioning, stable, and democratic state. While the international community spent millions of dollars trying to save Somalia from itself, we focused on maintaining peace within our borders, building strong state institutions, and creating a stable economy. And I'm pleased to say that Somaliland will be celebrating 22 years of independence on May 18th this year. Despite enormous challenges, Somaliland has held 4 peaceful elections and has preserved a culture of democracy. Our security forces have ensured that terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab have no safe haven in Somaliland. And we have tackled piracy off our coast with determined and comprehensive actions. Over 100 individuals involved in acts of piracy have been jailed by the Somaliland government. We have forged agreements with other governments on the transfer of these criminals. Our legislature has institutionalized Somaliland's anti-piracy laws, and we have partnered with friends in Europe and America to thwart these and other violent extremists both on land and at sea. But we also recognize that there is more work to be done. We have also made great strides with regard to education, development, and public health. While others in our region have struggled with famine and relied on external food aid, we have invested in food security and avoided the afflictions of chronic hunger and disease. In fact, during the last drought in the region, our government donated nearly $700,000 in humanitarian assistance to Somalia. We accomplished all this independently with limited assistance from the international community. This spirit of self-reliance continues to guide our nation to this day. My presence in Washington today is a testament to our success. I recently stood in front of my parliament and described the state of our union to the people of Somaliland, one of the methods that we employ to ensure accountability and good governance. I spoke of my administration's challenges, especially in the diplomatic arena, where recognition remains our overarching goal, and our accomplishments, which include strengthening the independence of the Election Commission, facilitating the decentralization of the state, and empowering local communities, increasing government revenue and streamlining the tax system, presenting for the first time in our history a balanced national budget that currently stands at $180 million per annum, institutionalizing public finance reform with our first report due for publication at the end of this month. Further expanding and professionalizing the armed forces and police, improving relationships with the international aid agencies, and investing in education, which has allowed us to build dozens of new schools, hire thousands of new teachers, and make primary schooling free for all students. I am also proud of our most recent democratic achievement. Just a few months ago, we held our first municipal elections in over 10 years. In this process, over 4,000 candidates competed for 400 seats on local councils in cities and towns across Somaliland. As the political debates that framed those elections subside and these municipalities settle into the task of governing, we look forward to holding parliamentary elections as soon as feasible following the completion of our voter registration process. Somaliland continues to secure its borders to advance peace and stability in the region. Earlier last year, clashes occurred in the Bohodle area of the Sool region between government forces and certain militia groups that were seeking to destabilize and sow discord among the Somaliland population living in that region. It's important to stress that all conflict is regrettable and only a measure of last resort. During these operations, the government took every measure to safeguard the well-being of civilians, including full access to water and other basic services. To advance wider peace, my government also conducted civilian reconciliation initiatives in key towns throughout the area. Following successful dialogue with militia groups, the government released more than 200 prisoners and welcomed a number of the militia's key leaders into Somaliland's cabinet. To reinforce the peace, our government has also earmarked more than $1.2 million for development projects for the benefit of the communities in that region. Somaliland will continue to promote reconciliation as part of our ongoing efforts to strengthen unity within our borders. If you have been to Somaliland as a guest, a tourist, or an investor, you know that there is an oasis of calm in the troubled Horn of Africa. Dozens of international companies now recognize that Somaliland is a unique frontier market with real opportunities. Areas of Somaliland are anticipated to contain commercial quantities of oil, and energy companies are undertaking significant explorations. Coca-Cola has opened a state-of-the-art bottling plant, and other companies are beginning to recognize Somaliland's potential as a regional hub. Somaliland is very much open for business. We are proud of what we have accomplished with only limited outside help. On all fronts, Somaliland is poised to continue advancing security and prosperity for all citizens. As we do this, my people and I are watching developments to our south very closely. We hope that Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud will succeed where past transitional governments have failed. We also hope that enhancing diplomatic support and foreign aid from the international community will impede the corruption, tribalism, and militancy that have afflicted the people of Somalia for too long. A secure and peaceful Somalia that's able to build and preserve strong state institutions, fight terrorism and violent extremism, and stimulate a functioning economy is in Somaliland's national interest. To this end, over the past year, my government has undertaken good faith efforts to renew dialogue with Somalia and held direct talks with the transitional federal government in London, Istanbul, and Dubai. These talks laid the groundwork for my meeting just 9 days ago in Turkey with President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, where we affirmed our shared commitment to build trust and improve relations between our governments. Future meetings, the first of which we agreed to convene within 90 days, will aim to strengthen cooperation in the fight against terrorism, extremism, piracy, illegal fishing, toxic dumping, and other serious crimes. Somalia and Somaliland can and should be equal partners. Yet, as we proceed down this track, we hope and expect that those who are now reaching out to the new government in Mogadishu will do the same with our government in Hargeisa. In this regard, we have already received assurances from the U.S. government that its recognition of the government of Somalia will not negatively impact America's ongoing engagement in Somaliland. Our people were indeed encouraged by this gesture. However, as we move forward in dialogue and cooperation and continue to serve as a model of security, stability, and democratic governance in this fragile region, the people of Somaliland expect more. And that is why I have come to Washington on the heels of the landmark agreement between Somaliland and Somalia. The United States and the international community have recognized that the status quo in the Horn of Africa is not sustainable. Their engagement with Mogadishu seeks to stimulate and sustain the transition of Somalia to a viable sovereign entity. The same type of engagement is required for Somaliland. These two tracks are not mutually exclusive. Our people believe that the time has now come for the international community to fully recognize the security and stability they have preserved in the midst of chaos, and to acknowledge the legitimate, sovereign, independent status of their nation. A new international paradigm for Somaliland is overdue. Building on the Somaliland-Somalia dialogue that we have established and the bilateral relations that we are working to expand with other governments, a critical next step will be Somaliland's attainment of the observer status in our region's Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, and in the African Union. The United States can do much to engage its friends in the Horn of Africa and beyond to help us secure this role, which will facilitate further dialogue with key stakeholders in the region, including Somalia. We are not asking others to take a chance on what Somaliland may one day become, but rather to simply recognize the current state of affairs. Somaliland is a fully functioning sovereign entity. From 1960 to 1991, we gave unity within Great Somalia a chance. It did not work, and we cannot turn back. Today, only the people of Somaliland can and will decide their future, not the government in Mogadishu, not the international community. With proper diplomatic recognition, Somaliland will be able to contribute more effectively to a sustainable and prosperous future for the Horn of Africa, building on our own experience in forging an oasis of stability in a long troubled region. This is the pragmatic option, and it's also the only option. Recognition of Somaliland's independence is long overdue and must be part of any sustainable peace in this region. Somaliland, we also believe self-reliance and staying the course. We have rebuilt our nation from the ashes of a brutal war. We are willing to protect our freedom at any cost because we know its true value. And it is this value, more than any other, that we share with the United States. Thank you very much.